In aviation, attitude determines your trajectory, but altitude is what gives you the lift and hope to continue. A plane can be flying high and still headed in the wrong direction. This project was an 18-week journey, but the most valuable lessons came mid-flight when I had to divert. Today, I'll show you how adjusting attitude can help leaders like you navigate turbulence, reroute with purpose, and lift others along the way. I'd like to present this project, Altitude and Attitude, in support of my Executive Leadership Certification for the National Society of Leadership and Success, a nomination-only honor and leadership society. Leadership isn't just about titles or heading up projects. It's about showing up, speaking up, and creating pathways where none have existed before. Leadership also means knowing when to pause, reflect, and recharge. It is through everyday tasks and quiet moments that we reconnect with our purpose. I believe everyone has felt some of the things I've felt during this project, and I hope that you can take inspiration from how I handle my diversions. How this project got its name. Altitude is the vertical elevation of an object above mean sea level or above ground level of an aircraft or natural satellite. It's a crucial measure for performance, safety, and navigation calculations. Attitude, as it applies to aviation, is the capability of an aircraft to turn on 3 axes: heading, pitch, and roll, relative to wind and position along Earth's horizon. Whereas the other meaning of attitude that we're more familiar with is a mental emotion or feeling towards a fact or state. In aviation, altitude is how high you fly. Attitude, the aircraft's orientation, determines how well you navigate. And in leadership, both matter. This project challenged me to climb, divert, and rework my flight plan across 5 key dimensions of growth, which impacted my emotional attitude. The 5 areas of the project are physical development, intellectual pursuits, emotional care, ethics, and service to others. But, much like any project, these tend to intermix. It is difficult to silo any project, and very, very important to consider that everyone has a life outside of any project. Far beyond the big events like weddings and babies, everyday life has a way of sidetracking thought processes. And so it is also in everyday life that we find the motivation and reasons why we are doing a project or continuing in a role. There's a cliche saying to expect the unexpected, and this project was no different. I had barely gotten it off the ground, as in, I had just submitted my proposal and received an approval when I found out that I needed to have spinal cord surgery. All I could think about were the goals I had set and how realistic those were in light of this news. Soon, I started thinking about how I would need to change goals or backup plans to achieve the milestones. I thought about, what if I don't recover fully from surgery or something goes wrong? Some parts of the project progression were out of my control, such as that recovery, or outside organizations providing me with the resources I requested to complete the project. In light of that, I had to make some decisions for how to carry on, and a contingency plan to complete physical aspects of the project, which would be limited by recovery for at least 6 weeks. And if those wrenches in my gears weren't enough, when I sat down to record this project, my computer decided to die after 6 years of faithful service. So we've replaced it, and after one final diversion, I'm recording this for you. Staying flight ready is imperative, and the strength of the aircraft cannot be compromised for it to remain airworthy. Under the surface, the aircraft's skin, are lightweight but incredibly strong parts, such as you see here. The wings are able to flex, but they also allow the aircraft to soar, and they hold the fuel while doing it. Strength comes in many forms, both physical and mental, and the real strength lays under our skin, much like it does on an airplane wing. So, for physical development, I set out to play tennis 1 to 2 hours a week. When I learned I'd be having that surgery, I diverted my plan and decided that I would front load as much of it as I could and hope to backload some of it on the other end. It wasn't just movement, it was momentum for the rest of the project. My ball machine had to do some overtime for this one so I could stay in one place on the court after surgery. But I was able to complete my commitment, and tennis did play a large part in both my strength going into surgery and my recovery from it. And I'm proud of sticking to that overall time commitment. A great passion in my life is intellectual and professional development. I love to combine them. Altitude without a flight plan will never get you to your destination. So, for the intellectual pursuits portion of my project, I decided to tap into my professional life and complete the prerequisite courses for my broker certification through the International Aircraft Dealers Association. I'm happy to announce I completed all 62 modules of the program with over 23 hours of learning time. I plan to take my final certification examination the next time it's given in a few months' time. The second portion of intellectual pursuits was somewhat of a passion project. I had once worked for a Brazilian company. I found the people of Brazil to be warm, enthusiastic, and encouraging. While working there, I was so busy in my everyday life with the company that I only managed to pick up a few conversational words. This project was a great opportunity to make it a priority. I had planned to spend 15 minutes a day on Duolingo's Brazilian Portuguese modules, but found myself spending much more time on it. It was a great diversion from the surgery and eventual recovery, and I did end up completing the course. When I saw that this was going to occur during the 18 weeks, I added in Brazilian music, particularly bossa nova, research into the history of Brazil, as well as quite a few Brazilian films for immersion. I found that a lot of Brazil's history mirrors much of our own history in the United States. And somehow, out of that, their attitude is much different toward things than ours seems to be as a country. So I found that encouraging, and it shows as well the mental fortitude that it takes to get through, and how a change in mindset can really impact the overall goals. So leading into that is my emotional care segment. Air is essential for lift and thrust for the aircraft's engines, but it's even more vital for humans. Breathwork and meditation are essential to anchor emotional regulation and inner peace, providing clarity even in times of turmoil. I began by implementing the breathwork at bedtime to help me relax for sleep, but soon spread meditation throughout my day to help me respond in clarity instead of my initial reaction. And my initial reaction to meditation was that it wasn't going to work for me. But my goal was 5 minutes a day, and I soon ended up integrating it throughout my day, even if for a minute or two at a time. So that was part of my mindset shift, and it was integral to the rest of the project. Ethics are imperative. They cannot be faked. We can always learn more about ethics, but it must be part of our personality and personal brand. Additionally, I feel that if our workplace is not aligned with our personal ethics, we will never truly be satisfied. I work in sales, which is not a career that most people think of fondly when they think of ethics. But in that high-stakes world, some of the only non-negotiables are transparency and trust. To that end, I did enroll in a specific aviation training on ethics through the FAA's Wings program. The website did not list a time commitment to begin with, so it ended up being only about an hour and a half. I added in the book Duct Tape Selling as well, both as a refresher on sales best practices. It's always good to have a refresher. In aviation, we do a lot of recurrence. And then it was also an introduction to some new ones that I wasn't familiar with. As I mentioned previously, there's always a little bit of bleed over in projects, and this one was no different. The IATA brokerage course covered ethics in a majority of the modules. Ethics is up to us to uphold on a daily and sometimes minute-by-minute basis. So a little refresher course on ethics is always a good thing. The fifth part of the project was service to others. Another pivot occurred here. My initial plan was to review medical studies from a patient perspective for a publisher. I realized when I only received a confirmation when I signed up and nothing came for a few weeks, that I was unlikely to receive multiple studies during the 18-week time frame, and that proved true because I received no studies during the 18-week time frame. As in those initial days I pondered what to do, I was also preparing for surgery. And it was during the consult with a neurosurgeon I found out I actually had a slowly developing spinal cord injury that would continue to progress unless stopped. After the surgery, I found out about a medical study for people with spinal cord injuries, and I decided one of the best ways I could help other people in my position was to participate in that medical study instead of just reviewing them from a patient perspective. I enrolled in a study for acceptance and commitment therapy for people with spinal cord injuries and depression, which introduced me to ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. It greatly changed my outlook during this project. It allowed me to remember to put effort into things that align with my values. This fed into the second half of this project, which came to me when I was in the hospital under a quilt that I made for myself. I knew that other hospitalized people would enjoy a splash of color in their room, and I was able to find a group on Facebook that makes quilts to donate to Indiana University Hospital patients. I was able to adapt some of my normal crafting routine because I couldn't bend or twist, but I was able to finish the quilts, and I'm really proud of them. At the conclusion of this project, we were asked to consider several different methods of reflection, and the Johari window was very revealing. It was also one I hadn't come across before. I highly recommend including one in your own projects and encourage you to pause the video to read through the slide and see how you can implement this in your own project. A SWOT analysis is a classic tool, and it proved its use as well within this project. You may once again pause the video to review the slide, or simply let it play to move on. Altitude and attitude, lift and orientation. This project reminded me that leadership is a dynamic flight, requiring strength, strategy, and soul. Leadership is an individual path, and so an individual project taught me a lot, and it'll teach you a lot. However, it also taught me to remain empathetic and remember that those we lead also have outside influences. Please, if you're completing a Better Me, Better World project, be gentle on yourself. Feel okay if you have to pivot, and keep in mind that every project has its ups and downs. Flight is dynamic. It requires strength, strategies, and flexibility. I'm proud of the course that I charted, and I wish you the best in your own journey. Thank you for flying with me. Com coragem e coração, aproveite sempre o voo. With courage and heart, always enjoy the flight. Obrigada e ciao. Thank you and goodbye.